pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The born and the unborn.
Thank you guys for coming. We're just going to start out by introducing ourselves and talking for a minute about why we're here. And we're just going to each pass it on. Mac has a little bit of a presentation. We each have our own kind of thing. So I'm going to start it off. My name is Erica. I have 3 boys that we all live here in the Brentsville district, and I have a high schooler, a middle schooler, and an elementary schooler. So I am in the school at every level right now, currently. So that's a lot of fun. I want to talk about why we had this town hall, because I know we have a lot of reporters here, so hopefully they can report on what I'm saying and not just what they think is happening. That would be awesome for me tonight, because I'm reading a lot of articles in the last 4 days that are alarming to me. We were asked as commissioners, first of all, let me give you a little bit of a background on this commission, because I think that immediately when you hear this commission, a lot of people are turned off just by the name in general. We were all appointed by Board of County Supervisor members to be on this board. We are volunteers, we are not paid. We were asked to examine things in Prince William County and our experiences when it comes to race is what they're asking us. This commission, we have a chair who was voted on by majority of the commission to be a chair. She had asked us to have listening sessions in our district. Some of them have had listening sessions and they were not greatly attended. We decided to therefore have our listening session comboed for the 3 of us and call it a town hall, so that way people felt welcome to come. The goal of this town hall was to allow the public to speak about anything that they wanted to speak about for 3 minutes. I know a lot of people have felt stifled at the school board meetings or at other meetings not being able to speak, so we wanted to make sure that you have the opportunity here to come and speak. Me personally want you to speak on whatever you'd like to speak on when it comes to this county, what you love, what you dislike, what we can help you with. Again, we don't have a lot of power, we're just making a recommendation, and a lot of that recommendation is going to be made by the chair and the chairs of the commissions or the subcommittees that she has appointed, and none of us are those. So just to be clear, we were asked to do a town hall. That is what we're doing. I don't feel like this is an unsanctioned event at all. They may not support what we put on our flyer or what we invited people to speak about. That's their choice. They're not here. We're here, and we'd love to hear what you have to say about our county and your experiences. Thank you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Lyndon Steverson, and I was appointed by Janine Lawson to represent the Brentsville District. Janine Lawson is a candidate for U.S. Congress for the 10th District. She's running against Jennifer Wexton, so I'm asking you all to turn out and vote for her if you're so inclined. I'm an American citizen, and I'm a Christian. That should be enough to identify me. My family has been here in America for almost 10 generations. And I'm proud to say that I love Prince William County. I'm a retired veteran, 24 years in the military, most of that as a JAG officer. The prophet Amos asked the question centuries ago, can 2 walk together except they be agreed? In God we trust. Can we agree on that? We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal. Can we agree on that?
Hear, hear.
And are endowed by the Creator with certain inalienable rights. Among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Can we agree on that?
Yeah.
Yes.
Our rights are God-given, not man-given. Man can't take them away.
Absolutely. Salute.
Isn't this a great country?
Yes.
Can we agree on that?
Yeah.
What about all those people at the southern border just streaming in? They obviously think this is a great country. They want what you have. A good job, health care, and education for your children, upward mobility, and they are willing to sacrifice for it. I ran into a guy the other day, he was a Sherpa, Indian from Kashmir. They climb mountains, you know, very, very high mountains. He came here and he worked making sandwiches at Subway. And then he worked as a prison guard. And the last time I saw him, he was a Virginia State Trooper. All in less than 10 years. Talk about upward mobility. Where else in the world can a man do that? Nowhere. Only in America. This is a great country. If we can keep it. Can we agree on that?
Yes.
This is common ground. We can build on that. America, the melting pot. That's not taught in our schools anymore. Well, if America is not a melting pot, if it's a salad, can we all just get along? Rodney King asked us that. I was placed on the police and law enforcement subcommittee. We took a hard look at the police and racial relations. Law enforcement in Prince William County. Chief Peter Newsham briefed us on the use of force report, first time it's been done. And you'd be happy to know that all is well in Prince William County. We live in a great country and a great county. Now, a lot of people are clamoring about critical race theory, but no one can define it. I can't tell you what it is. Nobody has told me what it is. I feel like the Supreme Court Justice Hugo Black. You remember him, right? When he was asked to define pornography, well, he said, I cannot define it, but I know it when I see it. So I'm hoping tonight that someone can tell me something about critical race theory. Maybe even give us a concise definition. Thank you.
So we're going to work some of the logistics here so that I can see where the screen, what's up on the screen. In the August commission meeting, I was not present because of a death in our family and was out of town, but I did watch it. And when I watched that meeting, I heard the chairman of the commission address the issue of critical race theory. And there were a dozen or so people that were there at the meeting to comment about it. That was not on the agenda prior to the meeting. There was no warning about that subject coming up. So in our September meeting, I petitioned the chairman, pursuant to our bylaws, to add a discussion about critical race theory to the agenda. And then we had about a 40-minute discussion about critical race theory, what it is, and the problems that we're having with it. It's a hot-button political issue. There's no question about it. And the consensus of 3 people on the commission, there are 12 members of the commission, 3 people that spoke, other than myself, was that they didn't think that the commissions should look into this, that it wasn't the kind of issue that the commission was charged to do. Now, my personal position was, if you look at the resolution that was passed by the Board of County Supervisors, it specifically charged the commission to look into all issues that impacted communities of color, particularly in education, which is one of the 3 primary issues that they actually looked at and suggested that we explore. So clearly there was a division between myself and 3 members who expressed opinions on that day. So when Erica made the point that the chairman of the commission put out a press release earlier this week, yesterday, She said that this was not sanctioned by the commission. Now, she is charged with the bylaws, with the authority to represent or speak for the commission. But that assumes that the commission took a position on something to which she could intelligently speak about. They did not. And for her to suggest that this town hall meeting tonight wasn't sanctioned by the commission is incorrect. Now, anybody is welcome to go back and look and listen to the meetings in the past. And you will see that there are spirited discussions. There is a clear division philosophically among some of the members. Some of it divides along political parties based on those who appointed us. I was appointed by Supervisor Vega. She asked me only that I go and do my best to articulate the viewpoint about various issues that impact communities of color. The first thing that I, in January raised was the issue about whether or not communities of color were being disproportionately disadvantaged in the vaccine distribution policy and testing policy. The commission decided not to look into that on the premise that the county was handling it. 3 months or 4 months later, we discovered that the county was handling it okay, but not very well, because there was no specific plan, no best practices that had been engaged by other communities around the country that allowed for specific targeted programs to encourage and facilitate the vaccination of those communities of color. And we're bearing the responsibility and the burden for that, because there are many who lost their lives that, had they been vaccinated in a timely way, would have been successfully gotten through COVID. Second issue that I raised was about the COVID's impact on communities of color for our kids in school. If you look at the learning achievement gap data, we lost a whole year and a generation of minority students who fell further behind than their white counterparts. I raised that issue and I was told, let's not look at that, because we have a new school superintendent coming in, and give her the chance to address it. Now, to me, it had a lot to do with the issues that we were supposed to be looking at on those issues, and the commission decided to turn it down. I raised those two issues only to suggest that this commission has one objective that is inconsistent with the actual mission that we were given by the Board of County Supervisors, and I would suggest to you that it has nothing to do with those policies that impact communities of color in Prince William County. We have, over the past 9 months, heard testimony from a variety of groups selected by the chairman to come to the commission and talk about issues that impact communities of color in Prince William County. And frankly, what we've heard is that there is no systemic racism problem in our housing policy. In fact, the Department of Housing and Urban Development had funded 2 studies that were conducted by the Human Rights Commission, and the Human Rights Commission concluded that there was no systemic racism issue. And yet, you have the chairman of that commission, a member of our commission, also issue a letter in January that said that decried the scourge of racism in Prince William County. When I asked him where that was in housing, he said, well, we think there are unreported cases of housing discrimination. When we heard from the police department, the suggestion was that there isn't a problem that impacts communities of color from a systemic situation. Clearly, there are problems that some of these individual officers may have. Maybe they were mishandled, and we ought to correct those, but not a systemic problem. When asked, they said, well, there are unreported cases. Same replicated itself when we talked about education all the way through. What we have today is a pretty good county. We have targeted issues that need to be addressed, and we ought to find how we resolve those issues. For example, the demographics of both the county workforce and the school workforce do not reflect the demographics of Prince William County. We are a minority-majority county, and certainly we ought to do things that will help to recruit county employees from communities of color so we can rebalance that. That's an important thing to do, to reflect the values of our community. But we get to critical race theory. And the question is it true that we do not teach critical race theory in the Prince William County schools? I didn't know the answer to this question. I have been looking hard in every corner of every website at the Virginia Department of Education and in Prince William County to determine whether or not there is critical race theory being taught in our schools. I can tell you pretty conclusively that the representations made by various school officials are correct, that we don't have a textbook that says critical race theory. We don't hand out that textbook, nor do we have a teacher planning workbook that says critical race theory. So I think it's a fair decision that's made by some that we don't have. But we do have what's called culturally responsible teaching. And the question is that critical race theory in action? I asked the new superintendent directly in one of our subcommittee meetings if she could tell me the difference between the two concepts here. Is critical race theory being taught as a surrogate and culturally responsible teaching? She promised to get back to me. Has not done so yet, but I understand from news reports that she's saying we don't teach critical race theory in our schools. Again, no handbook, no teacher program. I agree with that. But what is culturally responsible training that goes on? Now, in terms of believing government officials who tell you that they're not doing something. Now, we heard the chairman of the school board say in public, we're not teaching critical race theory. But he said in a text message with another county staffer, school staffer, that they are. And when asked about it, he said, well, I don't remember specifically saying it. Well, look at the times, significant times, when the government's lied to us. Former Congressman Jim Matheson said, there's no question the government lied to everyone in southern Utah about the potential risk of nuclear weapon testing from exposure to fallout. No question at all. For 2 decades, government scientists testified under oath that there was no danger to the nuclear fallout from the testing that was being done. They encouraged mothers who expressed concern in St. George, Utah, who said their kids went out and drew animals on the cars that were coated with radioactive dust. And those government officials said there was no harm to them. Now we know they were lying. They were lying. And when asked after all that was exposed, they said, well, we didn't want to lose our position in the Cold War. And we had to do this nuclear testing and endangered the lives of Americans. How many of us remember the Pentagon Papers? Only a couple of us. The Pentagon Papers in 1971 were litigated in the courts after Lyndon Johnson, the President of the United States, covered up the escalation of our effort in Vietnam. And it took a leaker, a whistleblower at the Pentagon who released the Pentagon Papers. They incarcerated him. The Supreme Court ruled 6-3 that was protected free speech. But the point is, the government lied to us. They lied to us for a long period of time about issues of our involvement in Vietnam. Watergate. How many of us remember Tricky Dick, right? Richard Nixon said that there was no one in his administration, no one involved in his campaign, and no one was involved in this very bizarre incident. That was a lie. Right? Do we trust government officials? The Tuskegee syphilis study, there were 600 black men that were involved in this study. 299 of them were told that they had a blood disorder. There is a treatment for syphilis that became very prevalent during the course of that study, and none of those black men were provided the treatment. They were only promised medical treatment, but none got the therapy for syphilis. It is a scourge on the history of our country in terms of medical stuff. Henrietta Lacks, there was a lawsuit filed just yesterday against the federal government for their misusing without consent the cells that have been made companies billions of dollars. A black woman who was abused and lied to for decades and decades about this. Can we trust the government when they say, we're not doing this? And then you have the Prince William County Schools equity statement. Now this is sort of a mirror that helps us look into what's going on in Prince William County Schools. They talk about all of the conceptual framework of how we've got to have equity in our classrooms. I was instructed, along with my fellow commissioners, by the inclusion specialist for Prince William County, that all of us have an implicit bias and an unconscious bias. And if we were to say, I am not racist, you can't trust that, because you have an unconscious bias. If I say, I don't exhibit racist behaviors, you can't say that, because you have an institutional and an unconscious bias. You cannot defend yourself against this. And yet, the equity statement for Prince William County Schools embeds into it what I think are the concepts of critical race theory. What is culturally responsible teaching? Here, responsible teaching activates civic citizenship of all students and makes them active participants in the fight for social change. That is from one of the developers of culturally responsible teaching. Now, I don't think that a teacher should be political in the classroom. I don't think that we create students who become warriors of social justice. I think we teach them math, reading, and science. And I think we leave it at that. But culturally responsible teaching does far more than that because it's about equity. We want to restore current minority students to an equitable position for 2 centuries of discrimination. None of those children, particularly in the early grades, see a difference in the colors. And yet they're taught through this culturally responsible teaching methodology that they are going to be warriors in the fight for social change. All of us know about the Trojan horse, right? I think that it is a reasonable argument to suggest that culturally responsible teaching is the Trojan horse to get into our classrooms that allows for these kinds of theories to be taught. Now, I know this is a legitimate argument. We could say, well, there's an argument on both sides. I'm open to that argument. I think we all ought to be. But I think we have to look at what really happens. This is a front page of a slideshow that was done by the Virginia Education Department on equity. And they put up a webinar, many webinars. All of you should go and watch those webinars. Now, it's a burden, by the way. There are dozens of them. And at the end of perusing those, tell me that culturally responsible teaching isn't teaching the tenets of critical race theory in our classrooms. They talk about grading equity. They talk about stripping from the classroom incentives for students to be able to catch up. If you give them extra credit because they failed in class, you're not allowed to do that anymore if you're culturally sensitive because there are some minority students that won't participate. Well, we drag everybody down in order to have equity in the classroom, and I think that's a real problem. But culturally responsive and inclusive 9/11 commemorations. This was the curriculum that was being recommended by the Department of Education in Virginia. It was put up as part of their series. It was open to all teachers, and they were encouraged to actually participate in this program. The sound's not working. That's not good. Let me see if I can walk through it while it plays. This video, the introduction is made by the young lady that's the coordinator for all of this. And she's explaining on this video, and I'm sorry you can't hear the sound, about how this webinar series and all of the teachers are now being taught the approved curriculum for 9/11. Okay, that's what she's describing right now as she goes through this. She's explaining that the Virginia Department of Education just brought on a new person that was going to run the whole equity program as it goes through. And she makes the introduction of that individual here in 1 second. And when she comes on, she reaffirms that this curriculum for 9/11, what they're teaching our kids is part of the culturally responsible teaching pedagogy of the school system. They were telling the teachers that's what they should teach. And so she explains through that. I wish I could zip through it a little faster to see how it plays. And by the way, the webinar series is open to all teachers, and then they put it up on the web with the PowerPoint presentation that was associated with it. And this particular program was up for a period of time. It's no longer there, and you'll see why here in just a second when we get to the discussion points. So this is the individual that is the newly installed equity director. I'm not sure I have her title correct, but this is what this person is responsible for. And she's explaining how important it is for teachers to teach culturally responsible training, get this training so that they can teach children in the classroom and not make them uncomfortable, to value their lived experiences. So when they're there, everybody gets to that equity position that they are advocating for. And then she explains that then this is the presenter of the 9/11 curriculum, and she explains in this video, and you ought to go watch it. Well, you can't watch it, but you can get a copy of it, and you can email me and I'll send it to you, because someone smartly downloaded it before they eliminated it. But in here she's saying that if you're going to talk about the 9/11 curriculum, there's some things that you can and cannot do, or should not do. She says that you cannot teach children about the 9/11 terrorist attack on the United States, and you cannot call those who perpetrated that attack terrorists. You cannot. She said it will make kids uncomfortable in the classroom, that you should simply call them extremists, that you should not describe what happened in the events. Don't focus, she says, on the destruction of the property. Don't show the planes hitting the towers. Don't show the planes hitting the Pentagon. Don't show the crash of the plane that was brought down by heroes in Pennsylvania. This is all a story that she was saying that we ought to follow. Here she says, this is what's out. The false assumption of Muslim responsibility for 9/11. She said that the reproduction of anti-Muslim rhetoric, that it should not be a discussion of U.S. policy analysis. You can't talk about how the United States reacted to the attacks and how we responded. And then she said, you cannot teach American exceptionalism. She specifically said you can't go on and say that America is this bright light on a hill where people are coming in order for sanctuary for freedom. You can't say that. Now, I know what they're teaching in Iran. I know what they're teaching now in the schools in Afghanistan to men only. I know what the enemies of the United States are preaching, but she says we cannot teach that in the United States of America. And here she talks about the events and the heroism, focusing not on our first responders, but she actually encouraged that there be an emphasis on those first responders that were Muslims. Now, by the way, I agree that we ought to do that. We ought to recognize every hero that was a part of the resistance to the terrorist attack that occurred. And by the way, and here are the harmful practices that you get into, and you could just read them. It is amazing. It is amazing that this kind of nonsense gets peddled. And then she said, do not let students stand and talk about how great America is and how we fought back against this terrorist attack. Don't say that, because that's a harmful teaching practice. It'll shock you when you see this. It shocked the sensibilities of many, many people. And the reason that video is no longer on the Virginia Department of Education website. And by the way, the speaker said that she had briefed the Secretary of Education, Carney, that he approved of the message that she delivered there. He approved of her saying, you cannot call these people terrorists. Well, someone needs to educate Congressman Connolly, because in his 9/11 statement just about a month ago, he said they were terrorists. Someone needs to educate Senator Kaine. He said the same thing, and Senator Warren. This is not about politics. This is about a philosophy that is so corrosive in our schools. And so today, can we say, do we not teach American exceptionalism in our schools? Do we want our children not to have pride in their country, to understand the history lessons, by the way, good and bad? I'm all in favor of them hearing the truth about the history of the United States. Do not call the 9/11 attackers terrorists. This is a red line that we get to when we talk about, in my opinion, the philosophy that's being taught in our public school system today. Now, when I raised this issue with the commission, two things happened. First, a little background. I was told repeatedly by the school board member on the commission that there's little that Prince William County can do, that all of the curriculum is dictated and mandated by the Virginia Department of Education. By the way, that's a stretch, because there is significant discretion that the local school districts have. That was